Welcome to our deep dive into Beyond the Rainbow, Heal to Will.
Okay.
It's by E.S. Rojan, if you heard of it.
I have it.
So she's a woman in her 60s, and she has this really fascinating perspective, especially when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community. I think you're really going to connect with this.
What I think is so interesting about her perspective is that she grew up in this island nation where being LGBTQ plus wasn't like a thing. It's just normal.
Oh, wow.
And then she immigrates to the U.S. and has to face all this prejudice and discrimination. I mean, that's a huge shift.
Yeah.
That's really at the heart of the book.
Yeah, it's like her entire worldview gets flipped upside down. You can feel that tension in the book. So right off the bat, the book really digs into these challenges that LGBTQ plus people face. And she doesn't hold back, like discrimination, stigma, the pressure to conform. She's been through it, and she talks about how that can really hurt your mental and emotional health.
And she also talks about the impact of family dynamics and how society's expectations can cause so much anxiety and depression, that feeling of being alone that so many LGBTQ plus people experience.
Yeah, it's some heavy stuff. But the good news is that she doesn't leave you hanging. She goes on to highlight the power of chosen families and those strong communities, which I think is so important for anyone listening, no matter who you are. It's like finding your tribe. She even talks about her own story of coming out when she was just 14 and how those supportive friendships were crucial for her back then.
It's like she's saying, look, even if your family isn't there for you in the way you need, you can create your own family.
Exactly.
And these chosen families give you that feeling of belonging, of support, of acceptance, which can be so healing.
Yeah, it made me think about how many of us crave that sense of belonging and how much courage it takes to actually go out there and build those chosen families, especially if you've been hurt before. Her story is like a guide for building those support systems.
It really is. And what I find so valuable is that she doesn't just talk about how important community is. She gives you actionable steps.
Yeah.
She emphasizes really putting your mental and emotional well-being first and encourages readers to find LGBTQ plus friendly therapists and support groups. It's like she's saying, hey, it's okay to get help, and here's where to find it.
So practical.
Yeah.
And it goes hand in hand with this idea of self-worth that she talks about. Like, she's adamant that no matter what anyone says, your worth is inherent, like, period.
It's such an important message.
And then she dedicates a whole section to challenging those old-fashioned ideas that hold people back about sexuality, gender, or just limiting beliefs about life in general. It's like she's saying, go ahead, rewrite your story.
I love how she uses her own experiences to illustrate these points. Like when she talks about living in LA in the 80s, and she describes this vibrant LGBTQ plus scene, like the parties, the sense of belonging. It sounds incredible.
Yeah, until she drops this like bombshell about how she had to tone down her identity to fit in, especially at work. It was a time when being openly gay could cost you your job. Can you imagine having to hide who you are just to feel safe?
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it shows that even in places that seem progressive, the pressure to conform can be so strong.
And that makes her move to San Francisco so powerful. She talks about finally finding true acceptance in San Francisco in the Castro district. Like, she could finally be herself, surrounded by people who loved her for who she was.
Yeah. And it wasn't just about the location. It was a total transformation for her.
Right.
It's in San Francisco that she really dives into mindfulness and spirituality and understanding yourself better.
It's so inspiring. It shows that happiness isn't about where you live or what job you have. It's about loving and accepting yourself no matter what. That's something we can all relate to, don't you think?
Totally. It's about knowing that true happiness comes from within and that self-acceptance is a journey. And sometimes that journey takes you to places you never expected, literally.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of unexpected journeys, she doesn't shy away from the hard stuff. She talks about how the 2008 financial crash and, get this, a brain tumor diagnosis turned her world upside down.
Wow.
Yeah.
And during those tough times, she realized she had to make a choice. Would she be a victim of her circumstances, or would she take control and create her own reality? That's where her idea of reactive versus creative living comes in.
Okay, what does that even mean? I mean, is she just talking about being positive?
It's deeper than that. She's talking about the difference between being tossed around by what life throws at you, like a ship in a storm, and actively shaping your reality. It's about recognizing that you have choices, even when it seems like you don't.
So it's about taking control. But how do you do that when everything's falling apart?
And that's where she talks about the power of manifestation. But before you think it's all woo-woo, hear me out. She's very practical about it. It's about aligning your thoughts, feelings, and actions with what you want in your life.
So it's about more than just thinking positive thoughts. You have to actually do something.
Exactly. It's not passive wishing, it's active creation. You have to meet the universe halfway.
So you're saying, I can create the life I want, but how?
You have to take those first steps, even if they're small, and those steps have to be aligned with what you're trying to create.
It's like she's saying, the universe is ready to help, but you gotta show up.
Yeah.
It makes you realize you're not just a victim of fate. You can co-create your reality.
Exactly. And it challenges us to look at where we might be stuck in that reactive mode. Are we letting circumstances control us? Are we letting other people's opinions hold us back? She wants us to start making choices that match our values and dreams.
It's about realizing we have more power than we think. And speaking of power dynamics, she gets into relationships, and this is where it gets really interesting, especially for the LGBTQ plus community. Past trauma or rejection can really impact how we approach love and intimacy.
Yeah, and she doesn't shy away from that. She talks about the importance of setting boundaries, healthy communication, and finding places where you can be yourself. It's like she's saying, you deserve relationships that make you feel good, respected, and cared for. Don't settle for anything less.
And she brings this to life with the story of her friend Kathy. She kept going back to this woman who was emotionally unavailable and used her. It's a reminder that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away, even if it hurts.
It's about knowing your worth and not settling.
She's giving you permission to put your well-being first. And then she talks about something really important, the impact of trauma in the LGBTQ plus community. How things like rejection, discrimination, and that feeling of internalized stigma can have lasting effects on your mental health.
It's like she's saying, look, this stuff is real, it's painful, and it's okay to admit that you need healing.
Right. And she doesn't offer some easy fix, but emphasizes the importance of recognizing the effects of trauma and finding ways to cope with it. What really resonated with me was her idea of creativity as a healing force. She talks about how painting, writing, and music were like lifelines for her.
It's a reminder that healing can come in many forms.
Yeah.
We often think of therapy or medication, which are great, but sometimes it's about finding creative outlets to express yourself and connect with your inner world.
It's like she's saying, don't underestimate the power of art to heal. And then she takes it a step further with mindfulness and self-care. She's really into meditation and affirmations as a way to be present, reduce stress, and accept yourself.
Right, and she's not talking about some mystical practice. She's sharing her own experiences with these tools and how they helped her through tough times.
It's about taking a moment to breathe, be present, and remember that you're not alone. You have this inner strength that you can tap into. And she even suggests different techniques to try, like centering meditation, chakra meditation, and guided visualizations.
She wants you to find what works for you and make it part of your daily life. She's not saying do this or that. She's saying experiment, figure out what resonates with you.
It's about building your own self-care toolkit. And one of the most important tools in that kit, she argues, is self-compassion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She knows that we're all a work in progress and that treating ourselves with kindness, especially when things are tough, is so important.
It's about silencing that inner critic that tells you you're not good enough and offering yourself the same empathy you would give a friend. It's a big deal in a world that tells us to be tough and hide our weaknesses. But it's in that space of self-compassion where real healing and growth happen.
So true. And it's not just about adding things to your to-do list. It's about making space for things that nourish you, that make you feel grounded and whole.
Right. It's about giving yourself permission to recharge, to show up for yourself and others in a way that feels good and sustainable. And she even tells a story about how her brain tumor diagnosis forced her to slow down, take care of herself, and find peace within.
She calls it a blessing in disguise, which might sound strange, but it shows how she finds meaning, even when things are really hard.
It's like she's saying, life's going to throw you curveballs. It's how you respond that matters. And she chose to respond by going inward, taking care of herself, and finding a kind of peace that went beyond her circumstances.
It's so inspiring, you know? It makes you think about how you're living your life. Are you caught up in the rush, forgetting to take care of yourself? Or are you making space for self-care, making your well-being a priority?
It's a question we should all ask ourselves. And it leads perfectly into the next part of our deep dive, where E.S. Rojan talks about how powerful creativity can be for healing and why it's so important to celebrate the different ways people heal.
I love that about her book. It's a constant reminder that we're all on this journey and that embracing our own path is how we find true happiness.
Exactly. And sometimes those paths take us to unexpected places.
One of the things that struck me in this next section is how she talks about storytelling as healing. Not just for the person telling the story, but for the person hearing it too.
Right, yeah. Like sharing your story, especially the things you've kept secret or felt ashamed of, can be so powerful. It's like you're finally letting go of this weight you've been carrying.
hmm And she even talks about Ellen DeGeneres and how she used her stand-up routine conversation with God to deal with the grief of losing her girlfriend, turning that tragedy into something funny and connecting with millions of people.
Such a great example of how creativity can help you process those tough emotions and find meaning in what you've been through. It's like she's saying you don't have to suffer alone, your story matters.
Yeah, and it can inspire other people too. Makes you think about all the stories that are still waiting to be told, all the voices that need to be heard.
Yeah. What if we created more spaces where people could share their stories without being judged?
That's a great thought. And it connects to how E.S. Rojan talks about celebrating diversity, not just in terms of LGBTQ plus identities, but also in how we heal. She knows that there's no one right way to heal, and what works for one person might not work for another.
And she shares this powerful story about Alex, a transgender man who went through so much rejection from his family, but ended up finding love success and a deep sense of self-acceptance. It really shows how important it is to embrace who you are and find your people, the ones who get you, no matter what.
Alex's story is a great reminder that we're all different, and that's okay. We need to honor those differences to create a world where everyone feels safe and supported.
I like how she doesn't shy away from talking about those obstacles that can make healing harder for some people. She talks about the need for culturally competent healing mental health support that understands how race, gender, money, and culture all play a part in our experiences. It's about seeing the whole person, not just their symptoms.
It's a call for more awareness and sensitivity in the mental health world and beyond.
Yeah, it's a reminder that true healing looks different for everyone. And E.S. Rojan encourages us to figure out what works for us.
She's not saying follow these steps. She's empowering people to find practices that resonate with them, to lean on people who understand, and to be patient with themselves,
She really stresses that healing is a journey, not a destination, and it's about celebrating their small wins along the way.
which is so important.
Right. In our culture, we want everything fast, but healing takes time. It can be messy.
It's about embracing the ups and downs and knowing that setbacks are part of the process. Sometimes those setbacks actually lead to the biggest breakthroughs.
I love that. And once you've started to heal those inner wounds, she encourages you to use that healing to make a difference in the world.
She's a big believer in the power of speaking up and taking action to create change for the LGBTQ plus community. She tells the story of Marsha P. Johnson, a trans activist who played a huge role in the Stonewall Uprising and dedicated her life to fighting for LGBTQ plus rights.
Marcia's story is so inspiring. It shows us that even when things are hard, we can choose to fight for what's right, to lift each other up, and to create a world where everyone feels valued.
It's a call to action for all of us to find our voice in the community, whether it's sharing our stories, advocating for policy changes, or just being there for someone who needs support.
She talks about mentorship, how important it is to learn from those who came before us and to offer support to those who are just starting out.
It's about building a network of support and understanding.
We're all in this together. And she's clear that creating real change takes time and effort. You have to be willing to keep going, even when it's tough.
Progress isn't always fast or easy, but as long as we keep fighting for what's right, we're moving in the right direction.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. Sometimes the most important thing is to just keep showing up, keep speaking up, and keep believing in a better future.
And that belief in a better future is all over E.S. Rojan's book. Despite everything she's been through, she's incredibly optimistic about the power of love and kindness. It shows how resilient she is and how much faith she has in humanity.
It's like no matter what's happening, there's always a reason to keep going, to keep fighting for what you believe in, and to try and make the world a little bit better.
And it's not about ignoring the problems we face. It's about choosing to focus on the good, on what's possible, and on how much power we have to make a difference.
It's about knowing that even the smallest acts of kindness and courage can ripple out and create change.
And that brings us back to one of the most important messages in Beyond the Rainbow, self-acceptance. E.S. Rojan believes that true happiness comes from loving who you are, even the parts you don't like.
She wants us to let go of trying to fit into other people's expectations and celebrate what makes us unique. You are worthy just as you are. You deserve to live a life that's true to yourself.
It's about quieting that voice inside that says you're not good enough. You are perfect in your imperfections. Those imperfections are what make you you.
And she also talks about forgiveness, forgiving ourselves and forgiving others.
Holding on to anger and resentment just hurts us in the end. Forgiveness frees us from the past and makes room for peace and joy.
And she makes a great point. It's not about saying what happened was okay. It's about letting go of that pain for your own sake.
Right. It's about recognizing the hurt, feeling your feelings, and then choosing to let go. That's a powerful act of self-love.
And it can be life-changing.
And remember, forgiveness takes time. It's not a one-time thing. There might be bumps along the way, but it's the journey that matters.
I love that she emphasizes that healing is a journey, not a finish line. It's not about being perfect. It's about always trying to grow and be better.
She encourages us to embrace the ups and downs, to celebrate our progress, and to be kind to ourselves when we mess up.
We're all a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
The most important thing is to keep moving forward.
She also talks about gratitude and how focusing on what we're thankful for can shift our mindset from, I don't have enough, to, I have plenty.
It's about seeing the good things in our lives, even when things are hard, and appreciating the simple things.
Gratitude is a powerful tool. It can bring more positivity and joy into our lives.
One of the most inspiring parts of Beyond the Rainbow is how much E.S. Rojan believes in the power of love.
She sees it as this incredible force that connects us all and can help us create a better world.
She wants us to bring love into everything we do, our relationships, our work, our interactions with the world.
It's not just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day. It's a way of being that creates connection, understanding, and compassion.
And she reminds us that even when things are really dark, love is always there. We just have to be open to it.
She writes, breathe deeply, love fiercely, create fearlessly. The universe is waiting for you.
You know what? I believe her. This deep dive into Beyond the Rainbow has been amazing. It reminds us that even when things are hard, there's always hope, joy, and a chance to create a better future. You know, it's so interesting how growing up on that island where everyone was just accepted really shaped how she sees the world. She says that back home, being LGBTQ+ just wasn't a big deal. It was like normal.
Yeah, it really shows you how much the culture you grew up in can affect how accepting people are. Imagine living in a place where you never have to hide who you are, where being LGBTQ+ is just a normal part of life. It makes you realize that things could be so much different, you know? Like a world where everyone feels safe and celebrated for being themselves.
Exactly. And then she comes to the US and boom, she has to deal with prejudice. It's got to be like a huge shock to the system. You can really sense that change in the book. It makes her story and this whole deep dive even more important for anyone who's ever felt like they don't fit in, like they're an outsider.
Yeah, it reminds you that even in places where people think they're open-minded, there's still so much work to be done. It's not enough to just tolerate people who are different. We have to celebrate those differences.
And I think that's the big takeaway from Beyond the Rainbow. She's calling for us to celebrate what makes us human, to celebrate our differences, and to celebrate the unique journeys we're all on.
She wants us to be ourselves, to question those old rules that hold us back, and to make a world where everyone can thrive. It's such a powerful message.
Yeah. This deep dive has been incredible. What's the biggest thing that stood out to you from the book?
I think it's how optimistic she is. I mean, after going through all that stuff, money problems, a brain tumor, discrimination, she still believes in love, in kindness, in the possibility of making the world a better place.
It really shows you that no matter how hard things get, there's always hope. There's always a reason to keep going, to keep fighting for what you believe in.
And it's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about choosing to focus on the good, on what could be, and on the power we all have to make a difference.
It's about understanding that even the smallest acts of kindness can change things.
Exactly. And I think that's a good place to leave things. What small thing can you do today that reflects what we've been talking about? How can you be more true to yourself? How can you be kinder to yourself? How can you help someone else on their journey?
Beyond the Rainbow isn't just a book for LGBTQ+ folks. It's a book for all of us. It's about healing, growing, and choosing love over fear. It's something everyone can connect with.
We hope this deep dive has left you feeling inspired and ready to make a difference. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep shining your light.